Before the first European ships ever appeared on its shores, India was not a single unified nation as we know it today. Instead, it was a vast and complex mosaic of kingdoms, cultures, and communities. Towering Himalayas in the north, warm tropical coasts of the south. A land of incredible diversity, hundreds of languages, a multitude of faiths coexisted, great cities as centers of learning and art, villages following the rhythms of agriculture, lives tied to the monsoons and changing seasons, civilization across millennia, profound philosophies, groundbreaking scientific discoveries, breathtaking art and architecture. The social fabric was intricate and tradition-rooted. Society structured around caste and community, profession, social standing, whom they could marry. Yet there was dynamism. Great poets, saints, thinkers emerged from all walks of life. Predominantly agrarian economy, fields and self-sufficient villages producing food, producing textiles, spirituality woven into daily life, birthplace of religions, Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, Sikhism. Other faiths arrived and settled. Islam came with traders, Islam came with conquering armies. Result, Indo-Islamic blended culture. The land, immense wealth and wonder, famous spices, pepper, cardamom, master artisans, cotton textiles, silk textiles, intricate jewelry, finely crafted metalwork. These goods coveted across Asia, Africa, the Middle East. That legendary wealth drew traders and conquerors from distant lands, setting the stage for a dramatic and transformative chapter in India's long history. By the early 17th century, just as European interest in India was beginning to intensify, much of the subcontinent was under the rule of the mighty Mughal Empire. Forged by the conqueror Babur, this Islamic dynasty had reached its zenith, an empire of fabulous wealth and staggering power that controlled a significant portion of the world's economy and a population of over 100 million. Under emperors like Akbar, Jahangir, and the master builder Shah Jahan, the Mughal court became a legendary center of patronage for art, architecture, and literature. They built magnificent forts, serene gardens, and awe-inspiring tombs, including the iconic Taj Mahal. This splendor was built on a sophisticated administrative system that efficiently collected taxes from the fertile lands, funding both the court's extravagance and a powerful army that was, for a time, the most formidable in Asia. The Mughal era was a period of great economic prosperity. The empire's political stability created a vast single market, and Indian manufacturing, particularly in textiles, was the workshop of the world. Fine fabrics like muslin from Bengal and calico from the Coromandel coast were in high demand globally, creating a massive influx of silver that filled the imperial coffers. However, by the beginning of the 18th century, the mighty Mughal Empire was showing signs of decline. The long reign of Aurangzeb, the last of the great Mughals, had stretched the empire to its breaking point. His relentless military campaigns drained the treasury, while his orthodox religious policies alienated many subjects. After his death in 1707, a series of weak successors struggled to hold the vast empire together, becoming pawns in the hands of powerful court factions. Into this power vacuum rose ambitious new regional states. The Marathas, a formidable Hindu warrior confederacy, became a dominant power, their cavalry raiding deep into formerly Mughal territory. Elsewhere, powerful governors in provinces like Bengal, Awadh, and Hyderabad became de facto independent rulers. The political map of India was increasingly fractured. This period of political fragmentation created a power vacuum where these regional states were often in conflict with one another. It was into this complex and volatile environment that European trading companies began to expand their ambitions. They saw the internal divisions not just as a challenge, but as a golden opportunity to play one ruler against another. The story of the British in India did not begin with soldiers and conquest, but with merchants. Chartered in 1600, the English East India Company was for decades a minor player. Early envoys like Sir Thomas Roe at Jahangir's court secured trading rights, but were treated as humble petitioners. Yet, their persistence would prove to be the most successful and, ultimately, the most ruthless. They were not just ordinary commercial enterprises. Armed with a royal charter, they were powerful, semi-governmental organizations. They could build forts, raise private armies of Indian soldiers known as sepoys, and sign treaties with local rulers. The company was a unique hybrid, a private corporation wielding the powers of a state. The line between commerce and conquest was beginning to blur. The pivotal moment was the Battle of Plassey in 1757. The Nawab of Bengal, Siraj-ud-Dowlah, tried to curb the company's growing power, prompting a military response led by the cunning Robert Clive. On paper, Clive's army was hopelessly outmatched. But he had entered into a secret conspiracy with the Nawab's commander-in-chief, Mir Jafar. The battle was a sham. Mir Jafar's betrayal ensured that superior European military discipline gave Clive a decisive victory against overwhelming odds. The company was now a kingmaker. They installed Mir Jafar as a puppet ruler, and in return, the Bengal treasury was systematically emptied. This Plassey plunder made the company and its officials fabulously wealthy. The revenues from Bengal financed a larger army, which expanded company power through direct military conquest, diplomatic maneuvering, and subsidiary alliances that stripped local rulers of their sovereignty. By the early 19th century, the company dominated the subcontinent, its transformation from merchant to master complete. The result was the systematic deindustrialization of India. Once famed for its fine textiles, India's role was forcibly transformed into a supplier of raw materials like cotton for British factories and a captive market for their finished goods. This one-sided system shattered traditional industries, leaving millions of weavers and artisans destitute. The process produced a massive drain of wealth from India to Britain, contributing to devastating famines while fueling Britain's industrial revolution. Alongside this economic ruin came a cultural assault. The British, confident in their civilization's superiority, saw it as their duty to reform what they called backward customs. Reforms like the abolition of sati, along with zealous Christian missionaries and Western education, fueled a widespread belief that Indian culture and religion were under direct and deliberate threat. The first century of company rule was not a period of passive submission. Across the subcontinent, resentment frequently boiled over in violent peasant and tribal revolts, sparked by crushing taxes and loss of land. These were not a unified national movement, but a series of localized and fragmented uprisings, proving the foundations of company power were built on volatile ground. The final spark came in early 1857 with the introduction of the pattern 1853 Enfield rifle. A state-of-the-art weapon meant to modernize the army, its new ammunition carried a detail that would prove to be a fatal flaw. To load the rifle, the sepoy had to bite off the end of a paper cartridge. A rumor spread that the grease used to waterproof it was a mixture of beef tallow and pork lard. For Hindu sepoys, the cow was sacred. For Muslim sepoys, the pig was unclean. The sepoys saw this not as an accident, but a deliberate plot to defile them and break their caste. In March, at Barrackpore, a sepoy named Mangal Pandey attacked his British officers. He was executed, becoming the first martyr of the coming storm. The full fury of the rebellion was unleashed on May 10, 1857 in Meerut. The day before, 85 sepoys had been publicly humiliated for refusing the new cartridges, stripped of their uniforms and shackled before their comrades. That evening, their enraged comrades rose in revolt, broke open the jail, and freed them. The rebellion quickly spilled into the city, where the local population joined the sepoys in a violent uprising. They marched through the night to Delhi, the historic Mughal capital. There, they proclaimed the elderly and largely powerless Bahadur Shah Zafar, the Emperor of Hindustan. This single act was transformative. It elevated a sepoy mutiny into a broader political revolt, with a symbol of legitimate indigenous authority at its head, directly challenging British sovereignty. The rebellion was led by strong regional figures, many of them aristocrats dispossessed by the company. In Kanpur, Nana Sahib, denied his adoptive father's pension, led the revolt. In Awadh, recently annexed, the formidable Begum Hazrat Mahal fought for her young son's rights. The most iconic leader was Rani Lakshmibai of Jhansi, a warrior queen who took to the battlefield after the British annexed her kingdom. The British response was one of terrifying and indiscriminate brutality. Fueled by racial fury, British forces exacted a terrible revenge. Thousands of Indians, combatants and civilians alike, were executed without trial. Cities like Delhi were sacked. A favored method of execution was blowing rebels from a cannon, a practice known as the Devil's Wind, designed to terrorize the population into submission. The Great Rebellion, though crushed, marked a fundamental turning point. The East India Company was seen as an irresponsible failure. In 1858, the British Parliament passed the Government of India Act, dissolving the company and transferring its territories to the British Crown. Queen Victoria was proclaimed Empress of India, and a new, more direct form of imperialism began, the British Raj. The rebellion was over, but its memory would fuel the struggle for independence for decades to come. In the decades that followed, a new class of Indians began to emerge, one that had been educated in the Western-style schools and universities established by the British themselves. This English-educated elite was well-versed in European ideas of democracy, liberty, and nationalism. The culmination of these early efforts came in December 1885 with the formation of the Indian National Congress. The Indian National Congress was dominated by the moderates. Their primary goal was not to overthrow British rule, but to reform it from within, through constitutional agitation. The year 1905 marked a dramatic turning point. Lord Curzon announced a plan to partition the province of Bengal. Indian nationalists saw through the administrative excuse and called it a deliberate act of divide and rule. The agitation grew into the Swadeshi movement. Swadeshi meant using indigenous, Indian-made goods and boycotting foreign products. This led to a rise of new leaders, known as the extremists. Tilak's slogan captured it: "Swaraj is my birthright, and I shall have it." Tensions exploded at the Surat session of 1907. The dispute ended in an open split. This anxiety was skillfully exploited by British officials, eager to counter the growing power of the Congress by creating a separate political force. This convergence led to the formation of the All India Muslim League in Dhaka in December 1906. They insisted on separate electorates. The British government granted separate electorates in the Morley-Minto reforms of 1909. It encouraged voting and thinking along communal lines rather than as a unified nation. A new leader arrived on the scene who would transform the struggle for freedom entirely. Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi returned to India in 1915. It was in South Africa that he first experimented with a novel method of political action. He called it satyagraha, a form of non-violent resistance, fighting injustice not through physical force, but through moral courage and willingness to suffer. He spent a year traveling across India. He found a country crushed by poverty and fear under colonial rule. He realized the struggle had to move beyond the drawing rooms and become a true mass movement. Gandhi's first major application of satyagraha in India came in 1917, in the Champaran district of Bihar, investigating the plight of the indigo cultivators. Local British officials ordered him to leave immediately. Gandhi's response was a simple but powerful act of civil disobedience. The Champaran Satyagraha was a resounding success. The following year, 1918, Gandhi led two more campaigns. The first was in the Kheda district. In the same year, Gandhi led a very different struggle in the city of Ahmedabad. In 1919, the British government passed a set of repressive measures known as the Rowlatt Acts. Gandhi decided to launch his first nationwide satyagraha against them. On April 13, 1919, thousands of people gathered for a peaceful public meeting at Jallianwala Bagh. Suddenly, a British officer, Brigadier General Reginald Dyer, arrived with his troops, blocked the only narrow exit, and without any warning, ordered his soldiers to open fire on the unarmed crowd. The firing continued for about 10 minutes until the ammunition was nearly exhausted. The Jallianwala Bagh massacre was a horrific act of state-sponsored terror. It shattered any remaining faith that Indians had in the British sense of justice and fair play. In the wake of the horrific Jallianwala Bagh massacre, Gandhi was convinced that the time had come for a full-scale non-violent war. The non-cooperation movement was launched in 1920, a revolutionary call for Indians to peacefully withdraw all support from the colonial state. It involved the surrender of titles, the boycott of government-controlled schools, law courts, paralyzing the British administration. The boycott of foreign cloth was immensely successful, with huge bonfires of imported textiles symbolizing economic self-reliance. For the first time, women came out of their homes in large numbers, joining processions and picket lines, a profound social transformation that redefined their role in public life. The movement was a nationwide awakening. Just as the movement was reaching its peak, a single event changed everything. In February 1922, at Chauri Chaura, a crowd of protesters, after being fired upon by police, retaliated. They attacked and burned a police station, killing 22 policemen. Gandhi, a strict adherent to nonviolence, was horrified. He felt the people were not yet ready for a disciplined, non-violent struggle, and feared the movement was descending into mob violence. Against the pleas of many colleagues, who saw it as a retreat, he made the unilateral and deeply controversial decision to call off the entire movement, believing its moral foundation had been compromised. The years that followed were a period of rebuilding. By the late 1920s, a younger generation of leaders like Jawaharlal Nehru were growing impatient with the goal of dominion status. In 1929, at its Lahore session, the Indian National Congress declared Purna Swaraj, or complete independence, as its ultimate objective. To mark this new resolve, January 26, 1930, was celebrated as India's first Independence Day, a powerful symbol of the nation's unwavering aim. To galvanize the nation, Gandhi chose an issue that was simple, brilliant, and deeply resonant: the British tax on salt. It was a levy that affected every Indian. He announced that he would lead a 240-mile march from his Sabarmati ashram to the coastal village of Dandi to break the salt law. As they walked through the villages of Gujarat, the march grew into a human river. For 24 days the world watched, captivated by this moral challenge to an empire. On April 6, 1930, Gandhi reached the shores of Dandi. He would break the law by making salt from the seawater. This simple act was the signal for a nationwide civil disobedience movement. Millions across India began making salt, and raids were launched on government salt depots, met with brutal force but unwavering courage. The outbreak of World War II in September 1939 brought the conflict to a head. The Viceroy unilaterally declared India at war without consulting a single Indian leader. The Congress ministries, which governed several provinces, resigned in protest. Indian leaders were caught in a moral bind. They despised fascism, but could not fight for global freedom while their own nation was enslaved. After diplomatic efforts failed, patience ran out. In August 1942, the All India Congress Committee passed the historic Quit India Resolution, demanding an immediate end to British rule. Gandhi addressed the delegates and delivered a powerful, stirring speech: "Do or die. We shall either free India," he declared, "or die in the attempt." The government's intention was to decapitate the movement by arresting the entire leadership overnight. But they had severely misjudged the mood of the nation. A spontaneous, leaderless revolt erupted. The British responded with overwhelming force, arresting over 100,000 people. By the end of 1942, the movement had been brutally crushed, but the Quit India movement, though a tactical failure, was a strategic triumph. It made clear to a war-weary Britain that they could no longer rule India against the will of its people. The question was no longer if India would be free, but when and how. In March 1946, a high-powered cabinet mission arrived in India. Their task: transfer power to a single, united Indian entity. The Congress insisted on a united India. The Muslim League, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, demanded a separate sovereign Pakistan. But agreement fell apart. Mistrust and political maneuvering. Jinnah called for direct action on August 16, 1946. That led to horrific communal riots in Calcutta, thousands killed. In February 1947, Prime Minister Attlee announced independence. He appointed Lord Louis Mountbatten as new viceroy. The task of drawing the new borders was assigned to Sir Cyril Radcliffe. Working with outdated maps and inaccurate census data, he drew lines on a map that cut through villages, farms, rivers, and communities. As the clock struck midnight on August 14 at 1947, the British Raj in India officially came to an end. In New Delhi, Jawaharlal Nehru delivered his tryst with destiny speech. Long years ago we made a tryst with destiny, and now the time comes when we shall redeem our pledge. Across the country there were scenes of immense joy and celebration, but the joy was tragically incomplete. The announcement of the Radcliffe Line was the trigger that unleashed a cataclysm of violence. An estimated 15 million people abandoned their ancestral homes. Men were butchered. Women were subjected to mass rape. Estimates of the dead range from 500,000 to over 2 million. Freedom had been won, but it had come at a terrible, heart-rending price. Mahatma Gandhi was heartbroken by the carnage, a lonely, tragic figure trying to douse the flames of hatred. The leaders of the new Indian nation embarked on the monumental task of building a modern, democratic state. The leading figure in this process was Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. The Constitution of India was formally adopted on November 26, 1949, and came into effect on January 26, 1950. It declared India a sovereign, democratic republic. It established a parliamentary democracy based on universal adult franchise. India's founders chose secularism. The task of persuading rulers fell to Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel. Patel convinced the vast majority to merge with India. In January 1948, Mahatma Gandhi was assassinated. His death was a profound national trauma. The story of India's independence is an epic saga. It is a journey that spans centuries. The path to freedom was not a single straight road. The quest for freedom is continuous, and the collective will of a people determined to be free can and will ultimately prevail.